Okay, I've been promising today to do a video on the culture of rape that we live in. And of course, everyone who knows me remembers this, but I'll catch you up on it if you don't know the background. Some people weren't born yesterday, some were. Um, Essentially, what happened to me is that I was tortured. And the psychiatric institutions serving the police state made out that my personal quiet, meditations harbored some aggression that violated the spirit of Amnesty International, which was presided over by friends of John Lennon. And they made out everything that they did as a form of therapy and shamanism. And they scapegoated me using a girl who used to rub her luscious vagina on my tongue. And you're not supposed to talk about that. If you go to the baseball game and you get heard saying that, the usher will kick you out. They started sponsoring presidents talking about grabbing women by the pussy as part of this culture of rape phenom. And they put out vagina monologue. But you're not supposed to ever mention that Leslie Katz was being intimately inciting of a boy who was traumatized from severe beatings and trying to embrace Martin Luther King's nonviolence. Clearly, the setup of a very sophisticated military joke. So, the idea that we parted ways, that she was still a virgin, brought in cackling from the women pimps in Neva Pornography Corporation who sell rape videos, real rape videos. I mean, these women go out and they terrorize girls and they put them into bondage overseas. And then they come back and blame the American consumer. I mean, I've been looking at R18, which comes from foreign England. It's an Anglo-Asian alliance that came and killed John Kennedy. And learning that they have, soundtracks to these things, and they have a cutoff point that shows what they're doing in human trafficking. Much as the people at Mariners Baseball have a cutoff point in what they will allow to be broadcast. I mean, they make an exception when it comes to Donald Trump. But they won't make an exception with me because the Mariners legal team chemically castrated me. And they did it in a way that made, my groin relatively unresponsive. I don't think I should say completely castrated, but it gave me double beats and diabetes. And they did this unlawfully, but very skillfully socially through Microsoft to hide that they were doing other things with surveillance over the soul. They've created a system of remote that chopped a woman in half. In Massachusetts, I saw it take a key out of my hand. And they have psychiatric bullies saying, we dare you to say that this thing can get inside your mind and broadcast brainwaves and voices and things like that. But that's exactly what the Beatles have been after, is escalation, dominance, and brainwashing. The airspace in the mind is what they are out to capture. And they shot Kennedy in the throat to silence him, then, they blasted him off the face of the earth. And getting hold of the son of a chair of philosophy of education to pull the nightmare of what they did to me was part of their, free smacks. For them, it was just the icing on the cake, getting Africa to laugh at the America who they humiliated and have held in completely virtual irresponsiveness. Now, there's a certain logic to the way they went about this. Penis Gabriel used me on the album So on a song called That Voice Again, and then went to NASA and went into gibberish on the air about how what if everybody could hear each other's thoughts and stuff. And what they did was that they implanted, do you or don't you want me to make you, like the Leslie question, between when we were complete miles from anyone out in woods stark naked, doing our thing, and I didn't rise to the occasion, and she mocked me. Is there a psychological vision that comes from Neva Corporation that was conjured? And they said this is proof of rape, okay? And it's built to confuse people because it was just meditation. It was just looking into the psyche and the soul of what they were up to. But they started pronouncing judgment on the idea that they had themselves suggestively neurohypnotized the pathetic wee-wee. So it was like absolute domination by Carnegie Mellon University and a terribly corrupt enterprise against the public institution that my father represented. And they had it all set up. My birthday is 6 months from Adolf Hitler's, and they used 1984, 1984 as the first four digits of my Social Security card. So these friends of John Lennon have been around putting out songs about smiling as the puppet stance. And Gail and Fripp used images of Gail Burston, who wrote this script about the AIDS attack, and Miles Kirshner, who represented Reagan, and the city of Pittsburgh had this board game which they had something at the end called Last Licks. So they knew what they were doing. It's not, Penis Gabriel was always singing "The weak must die," according to nature's law. And these people in Seattle are too weak to play by the rules, so they put poison in the food, rip or attack people, use remote to chop people in half. And Penis talks about the Hall of Fears, where all the fears are made real, because he wants to consummate. And we're seeing her playing music by an asshole who's threatening to drop a nuclear bomb on America to make the dreams of the Spirit Foundation shamans real, while they sell us out to Yoko Ono in a revenge attack by the Axis for King Edwards. That's very strange. They killed Circe Kennedy. That's very strange. And when you look back at where it originated with these Israelis in Bunker Hill of the East End, they had their own phone book with a Frankenstein in 1972 or 73, a Dr. Frankenstein on Bunker Hill. So obviously there wasn't a real Dr. Frankenstein there, but there was a real Dr. Frankenstein. Notice one is literary and one is figurative. There wasn't a figurative Dr. Frankenstein. There was a literal one. His name was Wattenmaker. So what they did was hotwire into the libido. And they used a neuroplasm. They wired into the libido of a kidnapped child from Iowa. My grandfather was around the 1904. He won a huge trophy for being the fastest handicap runner at the 1904 Iowa Athletic Association's running conference. So, you're talking about a pretty serious offense against the spirit of American normality. And after Truman came back, he said, return to normalcy. And these people were like, no normalcy. And they started yapping, oh, American normalcy is suppression of the black man. There's a certain truth to that and a certain falsehood. They brought in someone named Truman Shemp, which is making Truman one of the Three Stooges, and you combine it to Trump. Truman Shemp, Trump is the master of ceremonies who's going to avenge these stooges who think that they're better than the Axis. And will sell you out to Yoko Ono. And they have this idea that the illusion that they've conjured is much more important than the reality, because bullies forfeit the game when they actually come right out and say that Jimmy was accused of rape, because nobody believes that. I mean, they were setting me up with a vulnerable virgin girl to make a laugh out of the whole thing. And that's all it was to them. But they take it over so seriously that there's a meditative angle. And they worked with the pornography institutions to murder a lot of people with the AIDS genocide, and then confiscate the films and said, we're spiritually working a Bohemian Grove cleanse, and this way we'll rescue you from the fires of damnation by burning you alive in this world. So and who's the penis behind this is Martin Sheen. He's a mafia ball buster who comes in and then play acts that he's with the Catholic Work. He's the bridge in Selma. The judge who will make it possible for black people to get jobs in Hollywood. Aren't you thankful? And the whole thing is that they're targeting, abominably targeting the sanity of the United States of America. And everything has a factor of context. For example, if you look at corrections, they call sources informants because they don't want to dignify a person who's an inmate but an informant means they can blackmail them by circulating that the person snitched, whereas if you call them a source, understand that means something more dignified. It's something that the newspaper can go by. Well, when I was homeless from having been tortured and wrecked and deafened and kicked in the head and used a nerve agent and put under neurohypnosis where they're like, tell us, what is it you're dreaming? You know, they have this situation where people say, well, we don't believe him. He's just a man on the street. He's screaming from paranoid schizophrenia. But when I became a scholar in Phi Theta Kappa, because this woman taught me sign language, of course they raped her. And they raped Circe before they murdered her. All of these people who were hotwiring into the libido were then stuck with the fact that they weren't dealing with a person who was simply out in the streets ranting. They were dealing with a scholar who had been dislocated into a different context so that they could be used. And of course, I was deaf and I didn't have access to media, so I couldn't really speak for myself. As you can see, they've crippled me appearance-wise. They were saying I want him cosmetically damaged. I want to stick things in his mouth. These were the sort of people who can't play by the rules. They're criminal psychotics and they call themselves friends of John Lennon. It has nothing to do with anything but trickery. They're trying to confuse people as to what really happened. It's a terrifying double cross that you see in the film Casablanca as the symbol of the resistance. When they brought in the movie star from Hitler's cinema, Ingrid Bergman, these people wormed their way in through Hollywood after Reagan and his buddies murdered JFK. And they've been working this syndicate where the illusion is more important than the reality. And we are surrendering to them by refusing to identify their laws. It's frightening, believe me, to have seen this from beginning to end. I'm pushing 60, and they have another one in the wind.